This is what we're going to be working on today. It is a gun turret or a laser turret for a spaceship. You can move our aim control around. It's going to track your target, and then you can go pew, 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 and you can have a lot of fun, but you do need to provide the sound effects with your own mouth. Now in this setup, each of our components is a separate mesh. So we're not actually going to do any weight painting or use an armature modifier. We're going to use straight bone parenting. We are going to learn to master the track to constraint. We do have a driver on this, which is driving the recoil. That is a shape. So we're going to learn how to set up our control to drive that. Plus we're going to learn how to override the display of a widget. So we can have the gun turret track our target and the target track our gun turret without a dependency cycle. This is going to be super fun. So let's get started. Pew, pew, pew. All right, so here is our starting file. We're going to rig this up without using any weight painting at all. It's all just going to be straight bone parenting, and we're going to learn a lot of tricks. So I've already made a little bit of a start on setting up our file. We're going to continue with that by creating the full structure. So we are going to call this turret. This is going to be our master collection. I'm going to drag my geometry into there, and then I just need one more collection for our rig to live in. So let's just call this turret underscore rig. And here is where we're going to place our armature. So let's add our armature, Shift A, and then choose armature. And we can't see it. So we're going to turn on our in front, the wire, then go over to the data tab and turn on the names and the axes. So this is a very big model. That's okay. It's going to be for a spaceship. So it's probably the correct size. So let's just have a look at all the parts that we have. This model is broken up into its own components, which is why we don't need to do any weight painting. We can just do bone parenting. So we've got our footing here. This isn't going to move, it's going to be stuck, but I want a control to be able to move it around anywhere on top of the spaceship. So you can place it where you want, and that's where it's going to stay. This is the base. This is going to rotate around the Z axis. This one here is going to rotate around, well, I've already locked it on those channels, so it's going to rotate around the X. And this one here is parented to the body, which is going to be our recoil. Now, there's already a shape key on here. So I'm going to show you how we can drive this shape with the transform control on one of our bones. All right, so how many bones do we need? We need one for the footing, one for the base, one for the body, and then one for the control of this. This will actually be parented to our body, but I need a control for this one. And then we also need an aim bone, so something for this to target. And I will add a little bit of an extra bone over here in our aim setup, just so that we can do an override trick. But we'll get to that one later. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bones. So it's pretty easy. So let's jump into the side view. I'm going to grab our bone called bone and rotate it 90 degrees and scale it up. 5 meters will do. That's going to be our root. We might as well go ahead and name it now. Now the next bone is going to be the base. It just needs to be in line vertically in the right spot. So it can be in place in this spot, but I'm just going to duplicate this bone. I'm just going to snap it to one of the vertices here. So it's still in line, but it's going to be easier for us to select. Let's scale this one down. We don't need it to be anywhere near as big as the other one. Let's just make it 2 meters. That'll be big enough. This is going to be the base. I will make this a mechanism bone because the animator won't need to touch it, but I'll add that later. Next is our body bone. Now we already have a pivot point on our object here. So I'm going to use that to snap my cursor to. So cursor to selected. Then I'm going to jump back into edit mode and duplicate this bone here, and then snap the bone selection to cursor. Boom. And then let's label this. We're just going to call it body. And while we're here, I'm going to duplicate the body bone, drag it out here. Let's make it -20 and -18, just so that's a nice round number. This is going to be our main aim bone. So we're going to call that aim. And then I'm going to duplicate this one. Duplicate. I'm going to shrink it down a little bit just to differentiate them. Let's just shrink it down by half. And let's name this one. I'll add the mechanism to the front of all of our bones at once. But this one's going to be an aim underscore widget. That will do. And now all we need is our control for the recoil. So I'm going to just duplicate this one over here. Snap it to the end. I'll just shrink it down. Doesn't need to be that big. And then drag it up a little bit, and this is going to be called recoil. All right, that is all of our bones done. Let's do the parenting now. So our recoil bone should be parented to this body bone, keep offset. The body needs to follow along with the base, Control P, and the base needs to follow along with the root. And if you're wondering why you can't see those relationship lines, because I accidentally have them turned off, that'll help you if you can see. And now we have our aim widget. We're going to parent the aim widget straight to the aim bone. So when they're on top of each other, you can hold down Alt when you click, and then it's easy to select. So I'm going to click that and then parent it to the aim bone, Control P, keep offset. And then our actual aim bone just needs to be parented to the root so that it follows along. Control P, keep offset. So now I'm going to add the MCH to all of the bones that aren't going to be animated. So I'm going to select all the ones that are, and then invert that selection. So the root, yes, we want to be able to control that. The recoil, yes. And then the master aim bone, the one that's not the widget control. They're our bones that are going to be controls. So let's invert that selection and then use our batch rename tool, Control F2, change this over to bones. You only have to change this over to bones the first time, and then it stays on bones every other time. So we're going to choose that. Then we're going to set the name, prefix MCH, and go click. And while I already have them selected, I'm going to put them on a collection. Let's go new collection, MCH, and go create. All right, and our bones, everything else is already on this bones collection. So let's call this controls. And because it's a simple rig, I'm not going to separate it out any further than that. So basically we can hide our mechanism bones or bring them back, and hide all of our control bones and bring them back. Awesome. Let's name, I can't believe I've gotten this far and I haven't named the rig. Let's name the rig turret_rig. I will copy that and then paste it into the data name. There we go, keeping everything the same. So now I'm going to work on our widgets just to make it easy to select everything. So I'm going to bring up my panel here. The root control, let's give that a root, click create. That'll be a good size. That one doesn't need a control. Let's do an aim bone. I'm going to use a similar thing, just this root control will do. Click, although I want to rotate it 90 degrees. Let's rotate it on the X 90 degrees, and it is way too big. Let's just make it 25. That'll work. And for our recoil, let's use a double arrow and then click create. This is, whoops, I'll jump to the side. Let's reset the roll and the size, and then we'll rotate around the Y axis. So let's go 90 degrees on the Y. Boom, there we go. That's our recoil done. Well, and while we're here, let's do the colors. So let's make our root control red. Let's make that one green, and let's make our aim control, let's make that one yellow. Awesome. Okay, so before we actually do the constraints on our rig, let's connect our mesh geometry to what it should be connected to. The footing should be parented to the root bone. So let's just go bone relative, that will work. Next one up should be parented to the base. Our body bone can be parented to the mech body bone. And we don't need to parent the recoil to anything because it's already parented to that geometry. And that's done. So now when we move everything around, it should work like that. Now we just have to set up our constraints. So I'll start at the bottom and work my way up. This doesn't need anything, but we want our mechanism base to always follow our aim. Let's select our target, which is the bone over here that has the widget on it. Actually, let me clean up my view. I'll turn off the names for now because they're in our way. And I'll also just get rid of that annotation. There we go. Now it's a little bit easier to see. So we want this bone to track towards that guy. So first we select him and we go, who wants a constraint? I do. And if you're confused about which one that we want, it's easy to see that this kind of looks like a compass where we're only going to track on one particular axis. And this is what we want in our situation. So let's choose that one, but it's going to flip everything around. So let's go to our constraints tab. And that is because it is tracking on the positive Y, which is the length of the bone. We want it to track on the negative Y. And we also want it to spin around the Z axis. And that is what it's set to by default. So that's good. So now when we move this around, we've got the left and the right working. We just need to get everything else working. So we're going to do the same thing, but on a different axis for this guy here. Let's select our aim, then select our mechanism body and use a locked track. It's going to flip it around, but we know we want it to track on the negative Y. And what axis do we want it to spin around? Not the Z, because that'll go in the opposite direction. We want it to spin around this axis that's pointing out that way, which is X. So let's choose X. And now we have our bone that is tracking. Yes. Next up, let's do a little bit of a trick so that we can have this target track towards the body bone and have the body bone already, well, the body bone's already tracking towards our target. But if we put the constraint directly on this bone, we're going to get a dependency cycle. Let me show you what that looks like. So let's select this guy who wants a constraint. I do. And we're just going to choose a damped track for this one. You notice that kind of works. You'll see that our constraint is pointing back towards there. But if I reset this with Alt-G, you'll notice that something is broken and I have to push it again for it to work. That's a dependency cycle because this bone's trying to track towards here whilst that one's trying to track towards there. And it just can't do that. It's trying its best, but it has a dependency cycle. So that is the reason for that lag issue. And we never want to rig with a dependency cycle in it because it's not going to work in animation. You're going to hit render and it's going to lag behind. Now, workaround to get this to work is to actually put the constraint on our aim widget bone. Let's do that. Let's select this guy who wants a constraint. Control-Shift-C. Let's choose damp track. And now you'll see that bone is targeting towards where we want. And now all we want to do is override the position or the transforms of this widget and it's going to work. So let's go down into our custom shape and under override transform, we're going to choose that aim widget bone. Click. And now you'll see that it's going to work perfectly. How awesome is that? And when we reset everything, you'll notice everything jumps back because we have removed that dependency cycle. All right, one last thing to do, and that is to set up a driver to be able to control this. Although I will also just lock some stuff that we don't need because this doesn't need to move around other than the y-axis. So let's lock everything except the y-axis. Actually, while we're here, I'll also change everything over to be Euler. So I'm holding down Alt and then going Euler XYZ. This has a shape key on it. Let's connect the movement of our control here to this shape key. We're going to do that with a driver. It's super simple. We're going to hover our mouse over the location Y. We're going to right click and say copy as new driver. Then we're going to select this part here and we're going to paste it on the recoil. So paste driver. Now you'll notice when we move it, it's going to automatically move it, but it doesn't kind of move in sync. So we're going to fix that. So let me just figure out how far it's going. So here's where it started. I'm drawing with my mouse, so that was pretty bad. And where does it stop? It stops here. So that it's going back 2 meters. So it would be nice if we could sync that up so that when we move our control 2 meters, it's going to match that perfectly. So I will edit that driver. First, I'll bring up a window that has my driver's editor in it. I'll select the part that has the driver on it and try and frame everything so you can see it. We're going to adjust this curve. We actually need to lower this down. So I'm actually going to use an F-curve modifier for that. So over here in the modifiers tab, I'm going to replace our existing curve with a generator. And that's going to give me the same one initially. But then I'm going to change the coefficient from 1 down to 0.5. That's halved the slope, which means it's going to go slower. And you'll see now that it matches. But let's actually also limit our control so it doesn't go past. We're going to use a constraint for that. That would be a limit location because we're limiting it from itself. And we only need to worry about the Y channel. And we want to limit between the 0 and 2 meters. So let's go 2, but we don't want to leave it in world space. We want to change it over to local space. And we also want to enable this just so that when we drag it, it's going to physically stop on that value. So we drag it, bang, it's going to stop on 2. It's always nicer if the animators know what that value is. All right, so our rig should be working. Pew, 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 pew. So let's just tidy up our view. I'm going to turn off my relationship lines. I don't need them. Turn off the axes. And then hide our mechanism collection. And one last thing, I'm going to add this guy over into 2 collections. So under collections, add to collection, our master collection. Now he's in 2 spots. And we are done. Pew, 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 pew.